The discovery. In a chilling turn of events, a crime unfolded in the heart of Santa Rosa County that would forever alter the lives of those involved. Harvey Ray Smith, a 43-year-old man from Pace, Florida, vanished without a trace. His family, worried and desperate, began searching for him. What they uncovered in their search was far more disturbing than they could have ever imagined. The body of Harvey Ray Smith was discovered hidden in the trunk of his own vehicle behind a Motel 6 on Davis Highway in Escambia County. Smith had been reported missing for several days, and his family was the first to trace his vehicle to the motel. Upon finding the vehicle, they made the heartbreaking discovery of Smith's lifeless body stuffed in the trunk. The sight was horrifying. He had been murdered. The community was in shock. Who would do such a thing? Why was a man in his prime, with a future ahead of him, subjected to such brutality? The investigation began immediately. What started as a missing persons case quickly evolved into a homicide investigation. Investigators worked tirelessly, reviewing surveillance footage and witness testimonies. They soon began to uncover details that would change the course of the case. Harvey Ray Smith's tragic end appeared to be linked to robbery and violence. But there was still one crucial question. Who was responsible for this heinous crime? The investigation unfolds. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they focused their attention on two suspects, Deborah Leanne Burge and Zachary Vance Greer. The suspects, both from Molino, were quickly linked to the murder, and the investigation took a dramatic turn. Deborah Leanne Burge, a 22-year-old woman, was arrested and charged with homicide and robbery. Her arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Deborah, a young woman with a troubled past, was not the kind of person anyone expected to be involved in such a brutal crime. But as the investigation progressed, the truth began to unfold. Deborah appeared visibly nervous as she began answering the detective's questions. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke, and her voice faltered at times. The detectives, however, were already well aware of her movements. They knew she had been the last person to interact with Harvey, as surveillance footage had captured them together at a local pizza restaurant just hours before his murder. The footage had shown them sitting together, seemingly engaged in a normal conversation, but the detectives couldn't ignore the timing of their meeting so close to the tragic events that followed. Deborah's uneasy demeanor only heightened their suspicions. The detective realized that adopting a more aggressive approach with Deborah might be the most effective strategy to break through her guard during the interrogation.
He called my mom's phone. I can't remember the time because we were eating pizza in the car with the kids. And he called my mom's phone on our way there, and just I guess to see what I was doing.
On the way where?
Back home.
Okay.
And
so right after y'all talked.
Right after I seen him at Little Caesars, we left. And about maybe 20 minutes later, he called. I guess to see if I was in Pace anymore, because he knew that I didn't live in Pace. I lived in Molino.
Leanne,
noticing her anxious behavior and vague responses, he decided to escalate the intensity, shifting to a more confrontational
like this
tone.
man told you.
By turning up the heat,
The best
he
thing
hoped
that
to
you
shake
can
her
do
enough to expose
for you and
contradictions
your
in her
family
story, or even
is to
elicit
come
a
in here.
confession.
Tell the truth.
Deborah
Shoot
did
us
her
straight and
best
tell
to
the
portray
truth.
herself as the victim,
The reason
faking
you're getting so
ignorance about the
confused
entire
right
situation.
is because I think
She
you're trying to
insisted
tell
she
the
knew
version of the
nothing,
story that sounds
trying
best
to
for
distance
Leanne.
herself from the crime.
Now,
However,
I'll tell you,
the detective was not
being in
convinced.
this room,
His experience told
you can
him
tell
that she was
1,000
hiding
truths.
something. He could see through her attempts to downplay her involvement,
all of that
so he
help
pressed further,
can get
determined to
destroyed
uncover
by
the
one
truth.
lie.
I know.
As he asked more pointed questions, he hoped to break her carefully constructed facade and get her to reveal more about the murder. Now that they had her confession, the detectives needed to prove that Deborah was not a victim, but an active participant in the plan to rob and kill Harvey. They knew that her role in the crime needed to be clarified, as her attempt to portray herself as an innocent bystander was no longer convincing. To build their case, they began by questioning her about the conversation she and Zachary had after they loaded Harvey's body into the trunk. They pressed her for details, hoping to catch her off guard and expose any contradictions in her story. The detectives were determined to understand the full extent of her involvement, and they knew that the conversation following the murder could provide key insight into her role in the crime. The detective noticed that when he asked Deborah if Zachary had used a gun to kill Harvey, she began to panic, her breath quickening and her eyes darting around the room as she struggled to answer the question. This reaction suggested that she was unsure whether she had previously mentioned seeing Zachary with a weapon or if she had made a mistake in her earlier statements. Her hesitation was telling, and the detective could sense that she was trying to piece together her story in a way that wouldn't incriminate her further. Sensing an opportunity, the detective decided to revisit the question, carefully observing her every movement and facial expression. He hoped that he could expose any inconsistencies in her account or catch her in a lie. The detectives stepped out of the room to discuss their next line of questioning. When they returned, they planned to confront Deborah with a key question. If she wasn't present during the murder and didn't help load the body into the trunk, why had she washed her clothes?
What are you doing while he puts Ray in the back of the car?
I'm just standing there. I was in shock.
Okay.
It was...
Did you put your clothes in the washing machine? Why?
Because you told me to.
Did you have blood on?
Not that I knew of, but it was all over the car.
Did you get in the car to go back to the house?
No, I walked back down to the house.
So he drove the car down there?
No, Ray drove the car down there. Because remember, Ray was leaving.
No. After Ray got killed, okay, was he put in the trunk?
The detectives knew that this action raised suspicions, as it suggested she might have been involved in some way. They hoped to catch her off guard and prompt a response that could shed light on her true role in the crime. In their search for answers, law enforcement officials found Smith's vehicle abandoned behind the motel. The fact that the vehicle was left at the scene suggested that the crime had been carefully planned. The evidence pointed to the fact that Smith's murder was not a spur-of-the-moment act of violence, but rather a premeditated crime. Authorities began to piece together the story of how Harvey Ray Smith had met his tragic end. It became clear that the victim had been targeted by the two suspects, but the precise motive behind the murder was still unclear. Zachary Vance Greer, the second suspect, was arrested not long after Burge. He was captured by U.S. Marshals in the Santa Rosa County Sheriff's Office. Like Burge, Greer was charged with homicide and robbery. The two suspects had been taken into custody, awaiting their day in court. The motive and the trial. After investigating Deborah and Zachary, the detectives concluded that the most likely explanation was a robbery gone wrong, but there were still many unanswered questions. The two suspects had lured Smith to the motel with the intent to rob him. What had initially started as a planned robbery escalated into a violent murder. But it was evident that something had driven these two young individuals to act in such a ruthless manner. Was it desperation? Greed? Or was there another reason entirely? The aftermath. The family of Harvey Ray Smith was left shattered by his senseless death. Smith, a man with a bright future ahead of him, had his life taken far too soon. His family, who had desperately searched for him, were the ones to discover his body. The grief was unimaginable. No one ever expects to lose a loved one in such a violent and abrupt way. Reflection and justice. The legal proceedings concerning the murder of Harvey Ray Smith have concluded. In January 2015, an Escambia County jury found Zachary Vance Greer guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. And Deborah Leanne Burge, who testified against Greer, pleaded no contest to a reduced charge of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 15 years in prison for her involvement in the crime. In November 2015, Burge sought court approval to file a belated appeal, claiming she had instructed her attorney to file an appeal on her behalf, but he did not respond. Her attorney testified that he had discussed the matter with her and advised against an appeal, given her voluntary plea. As of now, there are no further developments reported in this case. Both individuals remain incarcerated, serving their respective sentences for the murder of Harvey Ray Smith. The community remains haunted by the violent death of a man who should still be with them today. Harvey Ray Smith's tragic death serves as a reminder of the dangers of violence and the lengths to which some will go for selfish gain. His family hopes that justice will prevail and that the story of his life and death will be told in the courtroom. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe Deborah's version of events, or do you think she played a larger role in the crime? Share your opinions in the comments below.